September 11th, 1969, Lubang Island, Philippines, 3:47 in the morning. The man moved through the rice paddy like smoke. His boots made no sound in the mud. His breathing was controlled, barely audible even to himself. After 25 years in the jungle, Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda did not walk. He flowed, becoming part of the darkness itself. 50 meters ahead, a figure bent over the rice stalks. Filipino farmer, Onoda thought. But farmers did not work at 3:47 in the morning unless they were not farmers at all. Enemy agent, had to be, checking dead drops, signaling to boats offshore, coordinating with the American occupation forces that controlled these islands. Onoda's finger moved to the trigger of his Arisaka Type 99. The rifle was 29 years old. Every part had been cleaned, oiled, and maintained with religious devotion. It would fire. It always fired. The distance closed. 40 meters. 30. The figure straightened, stretching his back. Old man, Onoda observed. Gray hair visible even in the moonlight. But age meant nothing. Old men could be spies. Old men could be collaborators. Old men died just as easily as young ones when you put a bullet through their spine. 20 meters. The figure turned. Onoda fired. The sound shattered the night. The figure dropped. Not cleanly, not instantly. He fell sideways into the water, thrashing, making wet, choking sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the silence that followed the gunshot. Onoda waited. Standard procedure. Confirm the enemy is neutralized. Watch for reinforcements. Never approach immediately. He counted to 60, scanning the darkness for movement, for lights, for any sign that the shot had drawn attention. Nothing. He moved forward, rifle ready, approaching the body that had stopped thrashing and now floated face down in 6 inches of muddy water. Onoda grabbed the man's shirt and flipped him over. The face that stared up at the sky was maybe 60 years old. Blood spread across the front of his shirt, mixing with the paddy water, turning everything dark and wet. No weapon, no radio, no equipment of any kind except a small bag tied at the man's waist. Onoda opened the bag. His hands, steady while firing the rifle, shook slightly as he examined the contents. Rice, a dented metal container with fish paste, a folded piece of cloth, not intelligence equipment, not spy gear, just food, a farmer's lunch. Onoda unfolded the cloth. It was a photograph, old and water-stained, but still clear enough. The dead man smiling, much younger, standing beside a woman holding a baby. Behind them, 2 other children, maybe 8 and 10 years old. Everyone smiling. A family photograph taken on someone's birthday or perhaps a wedding. For exactly 3 seconds, Onoda's mind went completely blank. Then training reasserted itself. Deep cover, he thought. The Americans were clever. They gave their agents families, histories, constructed identities so complete that even their belongings told consistent stories. This photograph proved nothing except that the enemy's intelligence services were sophisticated. Onoda put the photograph back in the bag, tied it closed, and let the body sink back into the paddy water. He melted into the jungle before the sun rose. He did not think about the photograph. Thinking about the photograph meant asking questions that had no acceptable answers. But that night, alone in his concealed position 3 kilometers into the interior, Onoda lay awake, staring at the darkness and seeing that smile in the photograph. That woman holding that baby. Those children who would wake up this morning and discover their father had not come home from the rice paddy. Stop, he told himself. This is what the enemy wants. Doubt, hesitation, weakness. The order was clear. Fight until relieved. Everything else was noise. everything else. December 26, 1944. 25 years earlier. A different war, a different certainty. Lieutenant Onoda stood at attention in Major Yoshimi Taniguchi's command post. Outside, the sounds of preparation echoed through the camp. Men loading supplies, checking weapons, digging defensive positions they all knew would not hold when the Americans came. Everyone understood what was coming. The only question was when. "Sit, Lieutenant," Taniguchi said. Onoda sat. Officers did not casually tell subordinates to sit unless the conversation would be uncomfortable. Taniguchi poured 2 small cups of sake from a bottle he kept hidden in his footlocker. He slid one across the table to Onoda. "The Americans will invade within weeks. You know this." "Yes, sir. Our forces cannot hold this island. You know this as well." "Yes, sir." Taniguchi drank his sake in one swallow. "Most of the men here will die. The ones who survive will become prisoners. The Americans will ship them to camps. Some will be tried for war crimes, real or invented. Some will simply disappear. You understand what I am saying?" Onoda understood. Modern war did not end cleanly. It ended in cages and tribunals and anonymous graves. "You trained at Nakano," Taniguchi continued. "Intelligence, guerrilla operations. You know how to survive in hostile territory. You know how to fight alone." "Yes, sir." "Then you will do so. Take 3 men. Go into the interior. When the Americans land, you will not engage them directly. You will conduct guerrilla operations, sabotage, intelligence gathering. You will make them bleed for every meter of this island." "For how long?" Onoda asked. Taniguchi looked at him directly. "Until I come back for you, sir." "You heard me correctly, Lieutenant. You will not surrender. You will not commit seppuku. You will not allow yourself to be captured. You will continue fighting until I personally return to relieve you of this duty." The words hung in the air like smoke. Onoda tried to process what he was hearing. "How long are we discussing, sir? Weeks? Months?" Taniguchi refilled both cups. "The war may turn. It may not. Japan may drive the Americans back. Japan may fall. I do not know. What I know is that we need men who will not quit. Men who will remember what orders mean. Men who understand that surrender is not an option until the order to surrender is given." "How will I know when that happens?" Onoda asked quietly. "You will know when I return for you personally, not a messenger, not a radio transmission, not a leaflet dropped from an aircraft. Me, in person, giving you direct orders to stand down. Until that moment, you continue the mission. Are we clear?" Something in Taniguchi's voice made it impossible to argue. This was not a request. This was not a suggestion. This was the final order Onoda would receive from the Imperial Japanese Army, and it would remain in effect until the man who gave it canceled it personally. "We are clear, sir." Taniguchi nodded slowly. "They will try everything to make you surrender, Lieutenant. Leaflets, loudspeakers, messages from family. They will forge documents. They will create elaborate deceptions. They will tell you the war is over, that Japan has surrendered, that the Emperor has ordered all forces to lay down arms. You will not believe them. Even if the Emperor orders surrender, sir." Taniguchi's face hardened. "The Emperor would commit seppuku before surrendering. If you hear that Japan has surrendered, but do not hear that the Emperor has taken his own life, you will know it is enemy propaganda. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." The logic was perfect. The logic was wrong, but Onoda would not discover that for 30 years. February 1952, 8 years after the order, 7 years after the war that was not over ended. Onoda lay in the undergrowth, 200 meters from the village clearing, watching the Japanese search party through the scope of his rifle. They had been on the island for 3 days, calling out, leaving supplies, begging the holdout soldiers to surrender. His mother was with them. He could see her clearly through the scope, older than he remembered, grayer, moving slowly like every step hurt. She stood beside a loudspeaker while a former Japanese officer spoke into a microphone. Soldiers of the Imperial Army. The war ended in August 1945. Japan has surrendered. Your families are waiting for you. Please come home. Beside Onoda, Private First Class Kazuka whispered, "That is your mother." Onoda said nothing. His crosshairs centered on the former officer's chest. Easy shot. 200 meters, slight wind from the east. No meaningful elevation change. He could drop the man before anyone realized where the shot came from. The officer stepped aside. Onoda's mother approached the microphone. Her voice, amplified and distorted by the speakers, still carried the tone he remembered from childhood. The tone she used when he was sick, when he was hurt, when he needed comfort he was too proud to ask for. "Hiroo, this is your mother. I know you can hear me." Onoda's finger rested on the trigger, not pressing, just touching. His breathing remained controlled. His hands remained steady. 25 years of training did not disappear because a woman who looked like his mother spoke his name. "Your father is not well. The doctors say his heart is weak. He wants to see you before he dies. Your sister Toshiko had a baby boy. She named him after you, Hiroo." The crosshairs drifted from the officer to his mother's face. She was crying now. Onoda could see the tears even at 200 meters. Real tears, real grief, devastatingly real. "Please come home. Whatever you have done, whatever you think you must do, it does not matter anymore. The war is over. Come home," Kazuka whispered again. "Lieutenant, what if they are telling the truth?" Onoda's jaw tightened. The crosshairs remained steady on his mother's face. He could end this right now. One squeeze. The guilt, the doubt, the voice calling his name, all of it would stop. But Major Taniguchi's voice echoed in his memory. "They will use your family. They will make you doubt. That doubt is the weapon." Onoda lowered the rifle. "That is not my mother," he said quietly. "Lieutenant, that is an actress. The Americans interrogated someone who knew my family. They found a woman who looks like my mother. They coached her on what to say. This is psychological warfare, Kazuka. This is what we were warned about." Kazuka said nothing. In the clearing, the woman who was absolutely Onoda's mother collapsed against the former officer, sobbing into his shoulder. The sound carried across the distance, raw and broken and undeniably real. Onoda turned away and began moving deeper into the jungle. Kazuka followed after a moment's hesitation. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the day. Some silences were too heavy for words. October 19th, 1972, 28 years after the order, 51 years into Onoda's life. The Filipino patrol appeared without warning. One moment, the rice paddy was empty. The next moment, 6 men were moving through it, armed, searching, coordinated. Professional soldiers, not farmers. Onoda and Kazuka were caught in the open. No time to retreat, no time to hide. They went flat in the water and mud, hoping the patrol would miss them in the pre-dawn darkness. The patrol did not miss them. Flashlights, shouts in Tagalog, then gunfire. Kazuka returned fire, his rifle barking 3 times before a Filipino bullet caught him in the chest. The impact threw him backwards into the water. Onoda grabbed him, dragged him into the tree line, fired twice to cover their retreat. They made it 30 meters before Kozuka's legs stopped working. Onoda pulled him behind a fallen log and checked the wound. Center mass, blood spreading fast, no exit wound, the bullet was still inside. "Go," Kozuka whispered. His voice was wet, gurgling, blood in the lungs. "No, Lieutenant, that is an order. Complete the mission." Onoda pressed his hand against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. It did not stop. It never stopped with wounds like this. Kozuka's hand gripped Onoda's wrist. His fingers were already cold. "Tell my mother," he said. "Tell her I did not die for nothing." Onoda opened his mouth to agree, to promise, to give his friend comfort in the last minute of his life. But the words stuck in his throat. Telling Kozuka's mother meant acknowledging the mother existed, was alive, was in Japan, which meant acknowledging Japan existed in a state other than war, which meant acknowledging the war might actually be over, which meant acknowledging that everything they had done for 28 years, every stolen bag of rice, every cut telephone line, every bullet fired at Filipino farmers, all of it might have been meaningless. "I cannot," Onoda whispered. Kozuka's grip tightened. Promise me it meant something. It meant everything," Onoda said. "The lie came easier than the truth. You followed orders. You never surrendered. You died with honor." Kozuka smiled. Blood stained his teeth. "The Major will come soon. You will see. He will come." "Yes," Onoda said. "Soon." Kozuka died 40 seconds later. His last breath came out as a sigh, almost peaceful, as if he had been holding it for 28 years and finally let go. Onoda sat beside the body until sunrise, holding his friend's hand, staring at nothing. The Filipino patrol had withdrawn after the initial firefight. No one pursued. No one cared enough about two ghosts from a forgotten war to risk more casualties. When the sun cleared the horizon, Onoda released Kozuka's hand, picked up both rifles, and walked deeper into the jungle. He was alone now, the last soldier of a war that existed only in his mind. The last man following an order that should have expired 27 years ago. That night, in a concealed shelter he had maintained for a decade, Onoda cleaned both rifles. His hands moved automatically through the familiar routine. Disassemble, clean, oil, reassemble. The ritual was comforting. The ritual meant structure. Structure meant purpose. Purpose meant the order still stood. He thought about Kozuka's last words. Promise me it meant something. It had to mean something. The alternative was impossible. 28 years of hiding, fighting, killing, running. 28 years of rejecting his mother's tears and his father's illness and his sister's baby named after him. 28 years of choosing duty over humanity. It had to mean something, because if it meant nothing, then Onoda was not a soldier. He was a murderer, a thief, a man who had thrown away 3 decades fighting imaginary enemies while real people died. The photograph of the farmer he killed in 1969 surfaced in his memory. The woman holding the baby, the smiling children, the family that woke up one morning missing a father because Onoda followed orders. "No," Onoda said aloud. His voice was harsh in the darkness. They were the enemy. All of them. The farmer was an agent. The photograph was part of his cover. The woman and children were probably fabricated. Everything was fabricated except the order. The order was real. Major Taniguchi was real. The promise to return was real. Everything else was enemy propaganda designed to make him doubt, to make him quit, to make him surrender without firing a shot. Onoda loaded both rifles and stacked them beside his sleeping mat. Tomorrow he would continue the mission. The day after tomorrow he would continue the mission. Every day, until Major Taniguchi returned to relieve him personally, he would continue the mission. He had to, because doubt meant confronting the truth, and the truth would destroy him far more completely than any bullet ever could. March 9th, 1974. Lubang Island, 2:37 in the afternoon. Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda fell to his knees in the mud and screamed. The sound that came out of his throat was not human. It was something deeper, older, the sound of an animal caught in a trap, watching its leg being sawed off. His hands clawed at the ground, fingernails splitting against roots and stones. 30 years of discipline, of control, of absolute certainty shattered like glass hitting concrete. Major Taniguchi stood 3 meters away, still holding the paper with the order written on it. The order that ended everything. Behind him, Norio Suzuki looked terrified, like he suddenly understood he had not rescued a hero, but broken something that was better left intact. "I killed them," Onoda gasped. His voice was raw. The words came out in Japanese, so rapid and broken that Suzuki struggled to follow. The farmers, the policemen, the boy who was guarding a water buffalo. "I shot them. I thought they were enemies. I thought the war. I thought—" His voice disintegrated into sounds that were not quite words. Taniguchi took a step forward, then stopped. "What do you say to a man who just discovered he murdered innocent people because you gave him an order 30 years ago and forgot to cancel it?" "Lieutenant," Taniguchi said quietly, "you followed orders. You did your duty." Onoda looked up at him. His face was streaming with tears and snot and mud. His eyes were completely insane. "Duty? Duty? I killed a man who had a photograph of his children in his pocket. I shot him in the back. I searched his body for intelligence documents and found a lunch his wife made him. That was my duty?" The silence that followed was so complete that Suzuki could hear his own heartbeat hammering in his ears. "You did not know," Taniguchi said. His voice had lost all its military formality. He sounded like what he was. A 70-year-old man who ran a bookstore and had not thought about the war in decades until a crazy young traveler showed up asking about a lieutenant he had sent into the jungle in 1944. "I should have known," Onoda whispered. 20 years ago, I should have known. 10 years ago, I should have known. Kozuka died, and I should have known. But I did not want to know, because knowing meant. He could not finish the sentence. Knowing meant 30 years of his life were a waste. Knowing meant his best friend died for nothing. Knowing meant he was not a soldier, but a murderer who used orders as an excuse to avoid confronting reality. Suzuki stepped forward carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "Lieutenant Onoda, you are not a bad man. You were a soldier following orders in a war. That is not murder. That is war. The war ended in 1945, Onoda said. His voice was empty now, drained of everything. I killed people in 1969, in 1972, in 1973. What do you call that?" Nobody had an answer. 26 hours earlier, before the order, before the breakdown, before everything ended. Onoda sat in his concealed shelter, cleaning his rifle for the 10,947th time. He knew the exact number because he had counted every cleaning since Kozuka died. Ritual was important. Ritual prevented thinking. Thinking was dangerous. His hands moved through the familiar motions. Disassemble, clean, oil, reassemble. The rifle was 30 years old, but functioned perfectly because Onoda had maintained it with religious devotion. The rifle was the last thing that still made sense. Metal and wood and mechanical precision. Pull trigger, bullet fires, cause and effect. Simple, unlike everything else. His body was not simple anymore. His body was 52 years old, but felt 80. 3 teeth had rotted out completely. His left knee made clicking sounds when he walked. His eyesight was still good, but his hearing was going. Decades of rifle fire without ear protection had taken their toll. Sometimes he heard ringing that was not real. Sometimes he heard Kozuka's voice, also not real. His hands shook slightly as he reassembled the rifle. They had started shaking 6 months ago, not enough to affect his aim yet, but enough to notice, enough to worry about. What happens when a soldier's hands shake too much to hold a rifle steady? What purpose does he serve then? Stop, Onoda told himself. Do not think about purpose. Purpose is clear. Follow orders. Wait for Major Taniguchi. Everything else is noise. But the noise was getting louder. 2 years alone in the jungle had done something to his mind that 28 years with companions had not. Human beings were not meant to be alone. Human beings needed voices besides their own, faces besides their reflection in water, validation that reality was real and not just elaborate hallucination. Onoda sometimes caught himself talking to Kozuka, having full conversations, asking questions and answering them in Kozuka's voice, because he remembered how Kozuka talked, how he thought, what he would say in any given situation. He knew this was insane. He kept doing it anyway because the alternative was admitting he was completely alone and always would be until he died in the jungle and animals ate his corpse. He finished cleaning the rifle and set it aside. Then he pulled out the small mirror he kept wrapped in cloth. He had not looked at his reflection in 4 months. Mirrors were dangerous. Mirrors showed truth. He unwrapped the mirror and looked. The face staring back was not his, could not be his. This was an old man, gaunt and burned and destroyed. The skin was leather stretched over skull. The eyes were wrong, too bright, like something fevered lived behind them. The teeth that remained were brown. The hair was gray and tangled with bits of leaves. This was not Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, 22-year-old intelligence officer. This was a ghost someone forgot to bury. Onoda wrapped the mirror again and put it away. He did not look at it again for the next 24 hours. February 20th, 1974. The day Suzuki appeared. Onoda heard the footsteps and went completely still. Someone was coming up the trail, one person, walking casually, either very stupid or very confident. He moved to a position with clear line of sight, 50 meters, easy shot. He watched a young Japanese man come into view. Long hair, modern clothes, backpack, no weapon visible, either a tourist who wandered off the trail or the most elaborate intelligence operation Onoda had ever encountered. The young man stopped. He pulled out a canteen, took a drink, then spoke toward the jungle. "Lieutenant Onoda, I know you are here." Onoda's finger moved to the trigger. His breathing remained controlled. 30 years of training did not evaporate because someone spoke his name. "My name is Norio Suzuki. I am from Japan. I just want to talk." Trap, Onoda thought. Obviously trap. Send a young civilian to lower defenses. Classic counterinsurgency. He had studied these tactics at Nakano. He would not fall for them. But the young man did not move like someone setting a trap. He moved like someone genuinely hoping not to get shot. And after 2 years of talking only to himself, after 2 years of answering his own questions in dead men's voices, Onoda wanted desperately to hear another human being speak words that were not scripted, not planned, not part of some elaborate deception. "What do you want?" Onoda called out. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, hoarse, unused, like vocal cords that had forgotten how to form words meant for other people. "To talk," Suzuki said. He still had not located Onoda's exact position. He was talking to empty jungle. Just talk. Maybe you tell me why you stayed. Maybe I tell you what happened in Japan. Maybe we eat some chocolate I brought from Tokyo. What do you think? I think you are trying to trick me into revealing my position. I already know your position, Suzuki said. You are in the undergrowth approximately 50 meters to my left, slightly elevated, with a clear line of fire to where I am standing. Your rifle is probably aimed at my chest because that is the center mass target you were trained to shoot. Am I wrong? Onoda said nothing. The young man was exactly right. So you can shoot me if you want, Suzuki continued, but I came a very long way to meet you. At least let me see your face before you kill me. Despite everything, despite 3 decades of paranoia, Onoda felt his curiosity overcome his training. This young man was either the most elaborate intelligence plant in history, or he was insane. Either way, Onoda needed to know which. He stood up. Suzuki turned toward the movement and smiled. You look terrible, Suzuki said cheerfully. When did you last eat? Yesterday. I stole rice from a farm. Do you know what year it is? 1974, Onoda said. February. And what year did the war end? The war has not ended. The Americans have occupied these islands and spread propaganda claiming Japan surrendered. But Major Taniguchi ordered me to continue operations until he personally relieves me. Suzuki's smile faded. He reached into his backpack slowly, maintaining eye contact. He pulled out a newspaper, Asahi Shimbun. The date was clearly visible, February 15th, 1974. This is about you, Suzuki said. You are famous. Everyone in Japan knows your name. They think you were either dead or the last samurai. They want you to come home. I cannot come home without orders. What if I bring Major Taniguchi here? What if he gives you the order? Onoda's rifle barrel dipped slightly. His hand started shaking harder. If Major Taniguchi orders me to stand down, then I will obey. The words came out broken, mechanical, like a machine slowly grinding to a halt. Something in Onoda's chest was collapsing. Some structure that had held him together for 30 years, suddenly realizing it was not made of steel, but of paper and spit. Can you wait a few more days? Suzuki asked gently. After 29 years, can you wait a few more days? Onoda nodded. He did not trust his voice anymore. Suzuki picked up his backpack. I will bring him, I promise. Here, he pulled out a chocolate bar. From Tokyo, 1974. Real chocolate from the real world, where the real war ended a long time ago. Onoda took the chocolate. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He managed to unwrap it and take a bite. It tasted like something he did not have words for. It tasted like everything he had lost. 4 days later, the meeting. Major Taniguchi looked small in civilian clothes. Old, harmless. Not the commanding figure Onoda remembered from 1944. Just an elderly man who wore glasses and probably had grandchildren and took medicine for blood pressure. Onoda stood at attention in full uniform. The uniform he had maintained for 30 years, patched and repatched, faded but clean. The last remnant of the army that no longer existed. He saluted. Taniguchi returned the salute. Then he pulled out a piece of paper and read the order that ended 30 years of war. When he finished reading, Onoda stood frozen. His mind was trying to process what he had just heard. Orders, canceled, mission, complete, return, to, friendly, lines. But there were no friendly lines. There was only jungle and farmers and tourists and a world that had moved on without him while he fought ghosts. Do you understand, Lieutenant? Onoda tried to speak. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He tried again. Yes, sir, I understand. Then you are dismissed. Something broke, not cleanly like a bone snapping, slowly like ice cracking under weight. Onoda unbuckled his belt, removed his sword, and held it out to Taniguchi. His hands shook so badly the blade rattled in its scabbard. Taniguchi took the sword. Onoda removed his rifle. His hands could barely grip it. He held it out. Taniguchi took it. Ammunition pouches, grenades, maps. Everything Onoda had maintained for 3 decades, still functional, still ready. All of it handed over, piece by piece, to an old man in a suit who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. When Onoda's hands were empty, when he had nothing left to surrender, when 30 years of purpose had been reduced to a pile of equipment sitting in the mud, he looked at Taniguchi and tried to understand how this was the same man who gave the order in 1944. Was it worth it? Suzuki asked quietly. 30 years, all those years. Was it worth it? And that was when Onoda's knees hit the mud and the screaming started. Afterward, when the screaming stopped, when the breakdown had run its course, when there was nothing left inside except emptiness, Onoda sat on a rock and stared at nothing. Taniguchi had walked away. Even old men who give terrible orders have limits to how much emotional destruction they can witness. Suzuki sat beside Onoda. He did not say anything. What could anyone say? How many? Onoda whispered finally. How many people did I kill? Suzuki had researched this. He knew the numbers. 30 confirmed deaths, injuries uncounted, decades of terror inflicted on people who were just trying to live their lives, while a ghost from the past continued a war that existed only in his mind. The Philippine government has a list, Suzuki said, but they are not pressing charges. President Marcos is pardoning you. He understands you thought you were following orders. Understanding is not forgiveness, Onoda said. His voice was completely flat. Those people are still dead. Their families still lost fathers, brothers, sons. Because I followed orders that stopped being valid 29 years ago. You did not know. I did not want to know, Onoda corrected. There is a difference. 20 years ago, my mother came to this island crying. I heard her voice. I convinced myself it was an actress. 10 years ago, radios were broadcasting news that only made sense if the war was over. I convinced myself it was code. 5 years ago, Kozuka was dying in my arms and asked me to tell his mother it meant something. I could not promise because promising meant admitting mothers existed in Japan, which meant admitting Japan existed in peace, which meant admitting I was wrong. So I let my friend die believing he had served with honor when really he died because I was too stubborn to admit I was wrong. You were not stubborn, Suzuki said. You were loyal. You followed orders. Loyalty and stupidity look the same from the outside, Onoda said. The only difference is whether the orders were worth following. These orders were not worth following. But I followed them anyway, for 30 years. And now I have to live with that. He stood up slowly. His body ached. Everything ached. 52 years old and feeling like 100. What happens now? He asked. Now you go home, Suzuki said. To Japan, to your family, to the world that kept turning while you stood still. Onoda looked at the jungle one last time. 30 years of his life lived in those trees. 30 years of certainty and discipline and absolute faith that meant nothing and accomplished less. Then he turned his back on it and walked toward the helicopter that would take him to Manila, then Tokyo, then whatever remained of a life he no longer recognized as his own. March 12, 1974. Tokyo Haneda Airport, 4:23 in the afternoon. Hiroo Onoda stepped off the airplane into a country he did not recognize. The noise hit him first. Thousands of voices speaking Japanese, but wrong, modern, filled with English words that made no sense. The lights came next, fluorescent, bright, artificial, nothing like fire or sunlight. Then the crowd, people everywhere, pressed together, moving in rivers of bodies that flowed around obstacles without thinking. Onoda's hand went automatically to his hip where his rifle should have been. His rifle was in a museum now. His hands found only empty air. A young woman walked past, wearing a skirt so short Onoda could see her thighs. She was speaking into a small device held to her ear, laughing at something only she could hear. Onoda stared. In the Japan he remembered, women dressed modestly. Women did not laugh in public while talking to invisible people. Lieutenant Onoda, a government official, touched his elbow. "We need to move you through immigration. The press is waiting." The press, hundreds of reporters with cameras and microphones and questions Onoda had no answers for. They shouted at him in Japanese that sounded like Japanese but contained words he did not understand. Salaryman, bubble economy, Beatles, Vietnam, Watergate, words that meant nothing, referring to events he had missed while hiding in a jungle, fighting a war that ended before most of these reporters were born. "How does it feel to be home?" someone shouted. Home, Onoda thought. This was not home. Home was a country that no longer existed. Home was 1944 Tokyo, where people bowed properly and spoke properly, and everything made sense because everyone understood they were at war, and war gave life structure and purpose. This Tokyo was chaos. This Tokyo was a nightmare wearing his country's name. "Are you sorry?" another reporter yelled. "For the people you killed?" Onoda stopped walking. The government official tried to pull him forward, but Onoda would not move. He stared at the reporter who asked the question. Young man, maybe 25. Soft hands, expensive suit, never held a rifle, never followed orders, never had to choose between duty and sanity. "I followed orders," Onoda said. His voice was flat, mechanical, the voice of someone reading from a script. "I did my duty as a soldier of the Imperial Japanese Army." "But the war was over," the reporter pressed. "You killed people after the war ended. Does that make you a murderer?" The government official physically pulled Onoda away before he could answer, which was fortunate because Onoda did not have an answer. Or rather, he had an answer, but speaking it aloud would mean confronting truth he was not ready to confront. They took him to a hospital. Doctors examined him like he was a specimen, noting every scar, every healed fracture, every sign of 3 decades living in jungle. His teeth were destroyed. His hearing was damaged. His body was malnourished and showing early signs of diseases that should have killed him years ago, but somehow had not. One doctor told him he was lucky to be alive. Onoda did not feel lucky. His family came the next day. His mother was 76 years old now. She had been 46 when he left. She looked at him with eyes that did not recognize what he had become and started crying. Not happy tears, sad tears, mourning tears, like she was looking at her son's ghost instead of her son. "Hiroo," she whispered, "what did they do to you?" "I did it to myself," Onoda wanted to say, but he said nothing. He let his mother hug him and pretend the man she was hugging was the son she remembered instead of the broken thing wearing her son's face. His sister Toshiko brought her children. They stared at him like he was a museum exhibit. Uncle Hiroo, who fought the war for 30 years. Uncle Hiroo, who was on television. Uncle Hiroo, who killed 30 people because he could not admit He was wrong. The children whispered questions to their mother. Why does he look so old? Why does he not smile? Why are his hands shaking? Toshiko had no good answers. That night, alone in a hospital room that was too clean and too bright and too quiet, Onoda tried to sleep. He could not. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the farmer with the photograph in his pocket. The smile in that photograph. The woman holding the baby. The children who woke up one morning without a father because Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda followed orders that stopped being valid 29 years earlier. He got out of bed and walked to the window. Tokyo stretched out below him, a sea of lights extending to the horizon. Millions of people living lives that had nothing to do with war or duty or orders. They went to work. They raised families. They laughed at television shows and complained about traffic and lived normal lives while Hiroo Onoda spent 30 years in a jungle killing people who were not enemies. The window was on the 7th floor. It would be easy to open it, easy to step through, easy to end the guilt and the shame and the knowledge that he had wasted his entire adult life following orders that meant nothing. But Onoda did not open the window, because even now, even knowing everything, some part of him still believed that duty mattered more than life, that following orders was more important than being happy or sane or able to sleep without seeing dead men's faces. He went back to bed. He did not sleep. May 1974, 2 months after returning to Japan. The Philippine government invited Onoda to return to Lubang, not for ceremony, not for celebration, for reconciliation. President Ferdinand Marcos had pardoned him legally, but pardon was not the same as forgiveness. The families of the 30 people Onoda killed wanted to meet the man who destroyed their lives. Onoda did not want to go. The government officials explained he had no choice. This was the price of pardon. Face the people you hurt. Acknowledge what you did. Try to make amends, even though amends were impossible. They flew him to Lubang on a military aircraft. Onoda sat in the same seat he had sat in 2 months earlier when they evacuated him. But this time, he was not wearing his uniform. He was wearing a civilian suit that fit poorly and felt wrong. He was not a soldier anymore. He was just a man who used to be a soldier and did terrible things because being a soldier gave him permission to avoid thinking about whether the things he did were right. The meeting took place in a community center in the main village. 50 people attended. Some were family members of the dead. Others were people Onoda had stolen from, shot at, terrorized for decades. They sat in chairs arranged in rows, staring at him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to rage to something worse than rage. Emptiness. The look of people who had grieved so long they had nothing left except the routine of grief. An interpreter translated Onoda's Japanese into Tagalog, their Tagalog into Japanese, making sure everyone understood what was being said even though understanding did not make it hurt less. A woman stood up. She was maybe 50, thin, wearing a black dress. She spoke in Tagalog. The interpreter translated, "You killed my husband in 1969. He was 48 years old. We had 4 children. The youngest was 6. You shot him in the back while he was working in the rice paddy. He died before the sun came up. My children grew up without a father. I grew up without a husband, because you thought he was a spy." Onoda stood at attention. Military bearing was all he had left. "I am sorry," he said. The words were inadequate. Words were always inadequate. I believed I was following orders. I believed I was fighting enemies. I was wrong. "Sorry does not bring him back," the woman said. Her voice was not angry. Anger would have been easier. Her voice was just tired. Tired of grief. Tired of loss. tired of existing in a world where her husband was gone because a stranger from another country decided he was an enemy. No, Onoda agreed. Sorry does not bring him back. Nothing brings him back. I took him from you. I cannot give him back. I can only tell you I am sorry and know that sorry is meaningless. Another person stood. An old man, maybe 70. You stole from my farm for 20 years. Every harvest, rice would disappear. Vegetables, fruit. My family went hungry because you took our food. Did you ever think about that? Did you ever think about the children who went to bed with empty stomachs because you stole their food? No, Onoda said. His voice was breaking now. I thought I was requisitioning supplies from enemy territory. I did not think about children. I did not think about families. I thought about mission, about duty, about orders. That is not an excuse, the old man said. I know, Onoda whispered. I know. 20 more people spoke. Each one a wound. Each one a life destroyed or damaged or permanently altered because Hiroo Onoda spent 30 years living in a reality that existed only in his mind. By the time they finished, Onoda was not standing at attention anymore. He was slumped in a chair, staring at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The interpreter asked if he had anything more to say. Onoda looked up at the rows of faces. People who had every right to hate him. People who had lost fathers, husbands, brothers, sons, income, security, peace of mind. All of it gone because one Japanese lieutenant could not admit he was wrong. I cannot make this right, Onoda said. Nothing I do will make this right. I will carry what I did for the rest of my life. Every person I killed, every family I hurt, I will remember. That is all I can offer. Memory, and the promise that I will never forget what I did. One woman in the back row stood up. She was young, maybe 30. She spoke in Tagalog and did not wait for translation before spitting on the ground and walking out. The interpreter did not translate what she said. The interpreter did not need to. Some things transcended language. When the meeting ended, Onoda returned to Manila and then to Tokyo. He did not sleep on the flight. He did not sleep for the next 4 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces. The widow, the old farmer, the young woman who spit on the ground rather than speak to him. June 1974, 3 months after returning to Japan. Onoda could not live in Tokyo, could not live in Japan. Everything was wrong. The buildings were too tall. The people were too soft. The country he had fought for, the country he had killed for, did not exist anymore. It had been replaced by something he did not recognize and could not understand. He told his family he was moving to Brazil. They did not understand. They had just gotten him back. Why was he leaving again? Because I do not belong here, Onoda said. This country moved on without me. Everyone moved on except me. I am a ghost. Ghosts do not belong with the living. His mother cried again. His sister argued. His father, old and sick, said nothing. He just looked at Onoda with eyes that understood. War changed men. Some men came back. Some men came back changed. And some men, like Onoda, came back but never really left the war at all. Onoda bought land in Brazil, Mato Grosso do Sul, empty land, quiet land, land where no one knew who he was or what he had done. He became a cattle rancher. He married a Japanese woman who had also moved to Brazil. They had no children. Some bloodlines were better ended than continued. He lived there for 20 years. Sometimes people found out who he was. Reporters, historians, people writing books about the war. They asked the same questions everyone asked. How does it feel? Do you regret it? Would you do it differently? Onoda gave them the same answer every time. I followed orders. I did my duty. I have no regrets. It was a lie. The lie got easier with repetition. By the 1,000th telling, Onoda almost believed it himself. 1996. 22 years after leaving Lubang. 52 years after receiving the order that destroyed his life. Onoda returned to Lubang Island one more time, not for ceremony, not for politics, for something he could not quite name but needed to do anyway. He brought $10,000, his savings from the cattle ranch. He donated it to the local school, money for books, supplies, repairs, money that would not bring back the dead but might help the living. The villagers who remembered him came to the ceremony. Some shook his hand, some did not. The widow of the man he killed in 1969 was there. She was 76 years old now, bent and gray. She looked at Onoda for a long time without speaking. Finally, she said something in Tagalog. The interpreter translated. She says you are an old man now. She says time makes ghosts of everyone eventually. She says she hopes you find peace because she never did. Onoda tried to respond. His voice failed. He bowed deeply, hands shaking, eyes wet. The widow turned and walked away without looking back. Some wounds were too deep for money or apologies or time to heal. Onoda returned to Brazil. He lived there until 2012, when his wife convinced him to move back to Japan. Tokyo had changed again in 18 years. It was unrecognizable. Everything was digital. Everyone stared at small screens instead of looking at each other. The country was different. The world was different. Onoda was the same, still carrying 30 years of jungle, still following orders that ended in 1974, but never really ended at all. January 16th, 2014. Tokyo. Hiroo Onoda died in a hospital bed at 91 years old. Heart failure. His body had finally decided it was tired of living when his mind could never quite make that decision. His family was there. His wife, his sister's children, now adults with children of their own. They said he died peacefully. But the nurse who was there at the end told a different story. She said in the final hours, Onoda was agitated, confused, speaking to people who were not there, calling for Kozuka, asking if Major Taniguchi had arrived with orders, asking if the mission was complete or if he needed to keep fighting. The nurse said his last words were in English. The nurse did not speak English well, but she remembered them clearly enough. He said, "I was wrong." Then he died. The question everyone debated afterward was what he meant. Wrong about what? Wrong to follow orders? Wrong to refuse surrender? Wrong to kill 30 people over 3 decades? Wrong to believe duty mattered more than truth? Onoda never clarified. He took the answer with him to the grave, along with the faces of 30 people he killed, along with the memory of his best friend dying in his arms, along with 30 years of jungle and certainty and absolute faith that following orders mattered more than being right. His funeral was attended by hundreds, government officials, military veterans, people who called him the last samurai, people who said he embodied the warrior spirit of old Japan. They spoke about duty and honor and loyalty until the words meant nothing. But there was another group at the funeral, smaller, quieter, standing in the back, Japanese nationals who had lived in the Philippines, people who remembered or had heard the stories about the ghost in the jungle who terrorized villages for decades. They did not speak. They just stood there bearing witness to the end of a man who could not decide if he was a hero or a monster, and so remained both until he died. The priest said Onoda was at peace now. The priest did not know what he was talking about. Men like Onoda do not find peace. They find endings. And sometimes, if they are very lucky, They find the courage to admit they were wrong before the ending comes. Onoda was lucky in the end. After 70 years of being wrong about everything that mattered, he finally admitted it. But admission without time to make it mean something is just words, and words never brought back the 30 people who died, never gave Kozuka his life back, never gave Onoda the 30 years he wasted fighting ghosts. The question remains, was Hiroo Onoda a loyal soldier or a deluded murderer? A tragic figure or a cautionary tale? A man who followed orders or a man who used orders as an excuse to avoid confronting uncomfortable truth? The answer is yes, all of it. Because human beings are not simple. War is not simple. And the line between duty and madness is thinner than anyone wants to admit. Hiroo Onoda spent 30 years on the wrong side of that line. He spent the next 40 years trying to convince himself he had been on the right side all along. In the end, in the final seconds of life, he finally admitted the truth. He was wrong. And that admission, 70 years too late, is the only honest thing he ever said.